At 57, Marie is sifting through the layers of a life spent mostly in the shadows. 50 of those years are a sharp, lived-in record of a woman who is only now claiming the right to be heard. Her trajectory began with a massive dislocation. Her parents moved from the rural, slow-paced landscape of Arkansas to Omaha, Nebraska, an urban environment that to them felt like a city without limits. But the limits inside their home were absolute. As a Seventh-day Adventist, Marie's world was defined by what was forbidden: secular television, non-church friendships, and a strict vegetarian diet, marking her as an outsider before she ever left the house. Isolated and intensely shy, she retreated into the only space she controlled, a miniature fantasy world. She spent hours scripting the lives of her Barbie dolls, using their plastic perfection to build the social life she was denied in reality. For a child, invisibility feels like safety. It is a quiet form of armor that works well in a vacuum, but it offers zero protection against the sudden external forces that can flatten a household overnight. That vacuum collapsed when her parents fell behind on the mortgage. Marie returned from school one afternoon to find out their entire life laid out on the front lawn, an eviction that turned their private struggle into a public spectacle for the whole neighborhood. The financial ruin forced Marie out of the sheltered private church school she knew and dropped her into the massive, unscripted environment of a public junior high. The transition was a violent culture shock. Suddenly, she was navigating hallways filled with cursing and social hierarchies she didn't understand. Her quiet nature and proper way of speaking made her an immediate target in a world that didn't value silence. Her reflex was to shrink further, hoping to remain unnoticed. But in that environment, being the quiet girl functioned like bait, drawing the attention of bullies who viewed her passivity as a lack of resistance. When the environment shifts from a rigid structure to total chaos, passive defense mechanisms fail. Silence stops being a shield and starts being an invitation for conflict. Marie eventually reached a breaking point. During a math class, she abandoned her introversion and physically fought against a persistent bully. The outburst was so jarring that the harassment stopped, but the victory was hollow. Retaliation ended the immediate threat, but it didn't touch the underlying anxiety. She still felt like an alien in her own skin, terrified of the crowds that filled the long school hallways. Recognizing this paralysis, her mother forced her into a public speaking course. The requirement was simple but devastating for Marie: stand before the class and hold their attention. At the podium, trembling and desperate, she decided to describe exactly how it felt to be a sheltered kid. She named her fear, turned her own shaking hands into a joke, and watched the room's tension dissolve into laughter. Laughter became a functional gatekeeper. By leaning into a goofy, high-energy persona, she could control the terms of engagement, dictating how others saw her before they could ever look deep enough to find the vulnerable girl underneath. As she was learning to navigate school, the foundational structure of her home disintegrated. After 18 years, her parents' marriage fractured into a cycle of nightly arguments that no one bothered to hide. Security vanished. Her mother began a descent into mental instability, and her father retreated into a new, chaotic life elsewhere, leaving Marie to watch the adults in her life fail their own standards. The pattern continued outside the house. While babysitting for a respectable family, the father began making advances toward her, cementing Marie's belief that adult relationships were built on dishonesty and power plays. Marie responded by building a wall of apathy. She adopted a cynical, hardened persona, viewing romance as a trap and vowing to never get married, stripping away any desire for connection so she could never be disappointed again. This brand of cynicism is the thickest layer of armor a teenager can wear. It functions as a preemptive strike, a way to reject the world before the world has the chance to reject you. Operating behind this wall of detachment, Marie made a calculated decision to lose her virginity to a neighborhood boy. There was no romance involved. It was a move to claim agency over her body before someone else could take it. The encounter was robotic. She spent the entire time faking her experience to maintain her hardened facade, ensuring she stayed emotionally distant, even as she was physically present. Because she felt nothing, she assumed nothing could happen. She constructed a dangerous internal logic. If there was no emotional or physical pleasure, then surely the biological result, conception, was impossible. Reality arrived in the form of a stolen pregnancy test. In the silence of her bathroom, the blue line appeared instantly, a physical truth that her apathetic armor couldn't deflect. Psychological armor can protect a person from social anxiety and emotional pain, but it is powerless against biology. The line was a reminder that some consequences cannot be joked or ignored away. The fallout was immediate. Her mother's disappointment was profound, resulting in a clear ultimatum. Marie would be facing the complexities of motherhood entirely on her own. The plan for escape evaporated. The acceptance to Boulder Fashion School and the dream of designing clothes in Paris were replaced by the reality of low-wage jobs and the constant pressing needs of a newborn. Decades later, that blue line remains the point where the fantasy ended and the work began. The years that followed were defined by the weight of that shift, balancing the search for stability against a world that rarely makes it easy for a woman on her own. While the armor of apathy eventually failed her, the one tool Marie built that endured was her voice. It is the same unapologetic voice she found at the podium years ago, one that no longer needs to hide behind a mask to tell the truth.